What are we whispering about?
And actually, there was something else that happened, which was a bit later on, once we had finished writing Faedom, both our daughters, I don't know if you remember Agnes, but they both found four-leaf clovers. My daughter in my garden, and I think it was Agnes, was it your daughter somewhere? And it was like in a space of like 24 hours. So that was pretty like magical, really, because it's not every day that you find two four-leaf clovers.
In the air, by the sea, from the land, and within you and me. Fairies are whispering. Have you been coloured, confused, completely captivated, and craving clarity? This is Claire Casely, and I am a fairy whisperer. To catch a whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast, and I'm your host, Claire. With me today, I have two really fabulous guests who are authors of a book called Enter the Fairy Realm, Faedom. It's a really beautiful book, all about fairies. Before we meet my guests, a reminder that if you want to appear on the podcast to talk about a fairy experience or about your connection with fairies, you can email the show clairefairywhisperer@gmail.com or message me via any of the podcast socials at Fairy Whispering Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and at Fairy Whispering on Twitter, or X as it's called now. I have with me Agnes Monogaro and Lorna White. And I'll just give you an outline of the book so you know what this wonderful book's about. Faedom will take you on an enchanting ride through fascinating fairy facts and fictions, revealing the secrets of where fairies come from and what lies behind their spectacular powers and personalities. Inspired by age-old myths that have long insisted that fairies are very much real, this book draws upon the great store of cultural and literary references from around the world. Fairy tales come to life across the pages with vibrant stories, songs, poems, facts, figures, and folklore to entertain and inform readers of all ages. It also includes facts about the natural world, including lunar cycles, astrology, crystal healing, and herbology. And I must say, it's absolutely beautifully illustrated by Nadzea Makeyeva. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Welcome, Lorna and Agnes.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for having us on the podcast. Thank you.
Hello, so nice to be here. Thank you, Claire, for inviting us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's really wonderful to speak to you about this beautiful book. What inspired you to write Faedom? And was there any particular fairy myth or story that sparked the idea for you?
There wasn't a particular story in the beginning. I think both Lorna and I, in our childhoods and throughout our lives, we've been connected to sort of fantasy and mythical creatures, and fairies have popped up in one shape or another in our lives. But the idea of this book came about when we were working on a charity project for our children's school. Our children go to school together, and we were just talking about the kinds of things we would like to write. Both of us were writers separately, and we were talking about writing, and we were talking about, fiction writing and nonfiction writing and fantasy and science, and kind of at some point we said, how great would it be to merge to create a book that merges magic and science, for instance, through fairies. And immediately we just had this idea, and we sat down a few days later and we created our outline. And so we had a pitch ready within a few days, and that was that.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think it all kind of slowly came together, and we, as Agnes said, we both have appreciation for fairies and fantasy, and I've been brought up in both France and England, and I was always kind of inspired by both French legends and English legends, and the French fairies are a bit different from, you know, fairies in England, I sometimes feel, because they're, a lot of them are kind of like I don't know, seen as like nearly like human, like human size people who are kind of more like fairy godmothers and who are benevolent kind of entities. And I've always felt that that's what a fairy is some kind of benevolent entity, like nearly like a spirit guide who's there around you. And even though fairies are flawed as well, but I've always been fascinated with the mysterious kind of magic that kind of fairies can bring, and what exists in their hidden realm, and how that realm kind of is all about nature, and how you have to respect nature because they're the guardians of nature. I don't know if I'm making that much sense, but I don't know, there's something so mysterious about fairies, and I think straight away we were like, well, the fairies are all about nature, and that's kind of what inspired us. How, like, if you look at nature, it's so beautiful and magical, and I think they're the kind of embodiment of nature, and I think that's one of the big inspirations. Sorry, so it was kind of a long-winded way to come to this, but yeah.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. I mean, I've spoken to lots of people that feel that fairies have some kind of, the reason that people see fairies or experience fairies is because they want us to see them and realize the importance of protecting nature and wild spaces around the world. So, and you were talking, I just want to come back to your connection because I didn't realize that you were friends and both parents taking your children to school. So this book, it's a beautiful book, and it seems to be aimed at all different ages. But as mothers, what would you want your children to take from learning about fairies and magic and
Yeah.
the science as well about, yeah.
So to me, I feel that we kind of bring a kind of like modern kind of we've kind of modernized slightly those like fairies, but also I feel it's kind of like giving them the opportunity to understand nature and why it should be respected. And also we've added quite a lot of spells in the book, and I feel it's one of these things where we want to kind of help children like build their confidence and be themselves, and that's why the fairies, I feel, are kind of quite relatable, and obviously you want them to discover the magic of the world, and also with that kind of explain why nature works, which is why there's like these scientific facts, but also there's a little bit of magic with these spells, that some of them can be quite empowering, or some of them, are just kind of enchanting because, if you're wishing for something, but others, there's like a shy away spell. So it's just to, to give them confidence to be themselves. And also because these fairies all have their flaws, to realize that we all have our qualities and our, and our flaws. And so it's just to, I feel that they're kind of relatable, and it's quite interesting because both our daughters have looked at this book, and Agnes will agree with me that each one of our daughters have said, I love this fairy. I really feel like I'm a bit like this fairy, or, like kind of superheroes, really. So, and I think that's what's really beautiful about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they are very empowering figures. And the interesting thing is that, Agnes, you're coming at this from a scientific background with your background in astronomy and astrophysics. Is that right?
Yes. However, my having that job is sort of a fluke. But it gave, when I was living in Paris for a while, I was looking for a job, and I happened to, it's a long story, but I happened to come across someone who was looking for an editor for an astrophysics magazine or journal. And I completely didn't think that I'd be suitable for it. And then, as it turns out, it suited me relatively well, and in the process, I've learned a lot about just the breadth of the world, and how huge our cosmos is, and how many infinite objects and energies there are in the world, and just this idea of how much out there we don't know about. I mean, just the sheer fact of how much matter in the world is actually dark matter, which is all of the things that are invisible in space, and that actually predominates in our world. So what we can see is a minute proportion of what's actually out there. And this has really given me a lot of food for thought. However, I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little girl, and I have been writing various books. And I didn't have much success at publication before, but I did take the route because I'm also fluent in Polish. I've been translating children's books from Polish into English for about 10 years, and so I've translated a lot of pretty interesting titles, which and the thing that always characterizes these books is that they combine elements of nature and science, but there's always a bit of culture and folklore in them. For example, I translated the first book I translated, or one of the first books I translated, was The Book of Bees by Piotr Socha. And that's quite a popular title among teachers and librarians because of the way it talks about science in a very accessible way, but also includes like facts about the history of how people have revered bees and how they've treated them. And so I've just been going along this path of gathering a lot of material, working on, material in translation, and then working in astrophysics, and all of those things have kind of combined together in my mind to make me to just mash up elements of science and magic together. And for me, that's how I make sense of the world.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I'm interested in your, as part of your research, this is a question for both of you. When you're researching fairies and from your different but similar viewpoints, was there anything that surprised you about fairies that you found during your research?
I think for me, what I found fascinating is that you also have quite a lot of dark fairies. And when I was doing my research, first of all, to me, like fairies have always been very kind of benevolent and, in fairy tales, etc. And then I found lots of stories about, kind of more sinister fairies. But then I realized it's kind of like the balance in life. You have, the good and bad. And I'm sure most fairies are very nice, but that was some of the stories, and the myths can be quite scary. And so I think that was one of the things that I never kind of associated naively, maybe, that the darker side of a fairy being associated with, like, being evil. But I guess this is part of the research. You found lots of different things, and so that was one of the things that surprised me about, like more in the kind of folklore and the myths and, fairy tales. So
Yeah, they can be, very dark.
I agree with Lorna, and I also think that in our society we're very black and white about what's good and what's bad, or we think we are, or we intend to be. And a child is either well behaved or badly behaved, when the human character, and so the fairy character as well, is more nuanced and complex. And one day you might feel a bit crabby, and you might not be the nicest you can be, and the next day you feel a bit better, and you want to do a bit better. So it's all a spectrum of different ways of being human, and so the fairies all have this, but obviously magnified into exponentially.
yeah, I completely agree with you, Agnes. It's like our approach is really to show that, no one's either really good or no one's really bad. And same with our fairies, like, as you say, obviously in a magnified way, but they have, amazing attributes, but they also have their flaws. And I think that's what's great in the book, is you can see that, especially if you look at the theology kind of chart and see, what their personality traits are. Yeah.
Oh yes, because I was going to ask about that. That you've got some lovely. So most of the book you're talking about different types of fairies and from different elemental realms, but then there's these wonderful double-page spreads with lots of fantastic facts, like the phases of the moon. And then you've got a map at the end of the book, which I found fascinating, about where to find fairies, a fairy spotting map. So just coming back to what you were just saying about the
Phaeology charts.
could you just explain to people what they are?
So yeah, it's like a chart of where you can see what each fairy's personality is like. So we'll have like the characteristics. So, whether they are I don't know, ambitious or bold or shy, etc. And then it will show a crystal that's associated with them, and a plant or a flower, and it's done into a wheel. So it's like a chart, and it just gives you like a bit of a recap of each fairy and what their personality is. What, if you had, for instance, for yourself, if you had like a few words to describe your personality, well, this is what it is. And I think it's quite a fun way for children and adults to kind of have a look and be like, oh yes, I like reading about this fairy. Oh yes, she's definitely, I don't know, cheeky and, but also a bit moody, etc. So that's kind of a fun thing that we put together because, because they are kind of, they've got their own quirks and their own personalities. And so it brings them to life, which, that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and the way that there are, well, the header at the top of that page, I think part of it, I don't have the book in front of me, but the last question in the introduction to that page is which of the Fae is most like you? And so when we were coming up with the concept of this spread, we were like, we didn't say this, but I think we all kind of thought that we would take an astrological approach to the fairies, and then everything that we've learned about these characters, and then in putting together their stories, we very much felt like they were alive and we knew them. So we felt like we could create these charts and just be very specific about who they are. And then this wheel format makes it, like Lorna said, makes it easy for someone to just go through and be like, oh, that's a fairy that maybe I identify with, and maybe not always, maybe today, maybe tomorrow I'll be more like this one. But it's a fun way of figuring out how you fit into this fairy world, because at the end of the day, we're all kind of fantasizing about being one of these characters.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. Exactly. We all fantasize about being. That is such a good way to say it. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the charts in front of me now, and yeah, it's beautiful. So, like you say, you've got the fire fairies, so you've got the different elementals and the crystals and the personality traits. Oh, it's really lovely. I love it. And I love the words at the top of the page I'm looking at where it says, there is a glimmer of Fae in each of us. Which of the Fae is most like you? And like you're saying, we're all a mixture, aren't we? And there's a tendency in history to look at fairies and say, well, that behavior, that was a bit naughty. But we all have that element in us, and so, like you say, by including those different aspects in the fairies that you're presenting here, it's also a kind of a message about acceptance, isn't it? Self-acceptance, and which is really important especially for young people, children, young people, this idea of accepting all parts of ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely. And then also when our fairies are bad or evil, there's a reason for it. So you could say, a lot of them are vengeful, and as human beings, we're dissuaded from being vengeful, even though it is a natural part of our human nature to want to be vengeful sometimes if we feel we've been slighted. And so because, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, fairies are these guardians and custodians of the natural world, they do feel very protective over nature and the realms. So any humans that kind of transgress the rules that they've that have been set up around nature, they will naturally want to do something bad to that person. So if someone's walking through the woods and trampling, on the grass or walking where they shouldn't be, then they might get tripped up or and things like that. So there's always a reason behind. Or there's usually a reason behind a lot of these behaviors. And so we kind of also gave them the freedom to be themselves and to be angry when they have a reason to be angry. And one particular thing that we highlight several times throughout the book is that no matter how naughty the fairies might be at a certain point, they do have a soft spot for children. So they will make that step to protect children because of their, because of their status among human beings as, special status, which children should be more protected in the human world. So we're glad to have them more protected in the fairy realm.
Yeah. We kind of see them, they're kind of a bit like fairy godmothers to children. So that, that's kind of one of the approach to see them, how you can see them really.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. Which I'm just wondering, is there a favorite fairy that both of you have that you were when you were writing about a particular fairy or elemental realm that you relate to?
I'm glad you said fairy and not elemental realm, because I feel I can't choose which element I would prefer. I think I can relate to fairies from at least one fairy from each element. And I think for instance, one of the fairies that I love from the fire element is Alma the kitchen fairy. There's Ondine the lakes and rivers fairy. There's Lunella the moon fairy. And also I think Agnes and I have this shared love for the dream fairy as well, Celeste, who is on the cover of the book. And I don't know, it's so for me personally, it's so difficult to choose because I don't know, there's so much about all these fairies that we love, so but I'd say if they were my top four would be those four. So yeah. What about you, Agnes?
Well, as Lorna already said, because we spoke about this recently. Well, we're constantly talking about who our favorite fairies are, and so yes, I also really, I really love the dream fairy, and I think a lot of people can relate to the dream fairy just because dreaming is so universal, and a dream can be anything. So basically anyone can be dreamed. The other ones are a bit more specific. Lorna and I were actually also talking about our astrological signs and how we thought that our favorite fairies would correspond maybe to that somehow. But I happen to be a Pisces, and yet I feel most attached to the air fairies. So definitely Dream and also Wind and Storm, who are a bit more volatile among the fairies. And I really appreciate the fact that they're able to kind of blow their anger out, which I think over the course of my life, when you're a child, you're not really allowed to be angry very often. So I think now that I'm older, I appreciate that kind of freedom to just, have a big gust of anger once in a while.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very healthy thing to be able to do, isn't it? I was wondering what you both think fairies are.
From my point of view, I feel like, I think, as I said before, they're kind of like these benevolent entities that kind of like guide you in life. And like, I don't know, there's sometimes you feel like there's a force or an energy that protects you. And to me, I feel, or that guides you in a soft way. I don't really know how to kind of verbalize it, but I feel that there's like, it's nearly like a protective kind of energy that surrounds you, and that's what I think a fairy is. It's a kind of a type of spirit that's there, kind of guiding you in life. I also think they can play little tricks on you, and I was thinking about this because a lot of the time I'm quite a bit of a scatterbrain, and so I lose things quite easily, and every time I lose something else that I've lost before always turns up. And I always think there's like a little fairy somewhere who's like, well, you've lost this time, but here's the other thing that you lost, like a bracelet or something that and I'm like, why is it here? It's not supposed to be here. And now it's kind of returned, but I'm still looking for something else that I just recently lost. So I kind of feel that, I don't know if it's like small signs sometimes that, you're shown in your life. There might be symbols and stuff. And I feel that's what fairies are like. I mean, I would love to see a fairy like materializing itself or herself or oneself, some in front of me. But unfortunately, I've never actually seen a manifestation. But I feel like a kind of an aura around me, and I've actually got a book which is called Fairy Spells, and it's all about seeing, communicating with fairies by an author called Claire that I bought when I was a teenager, and but yeah, so I feel more it's kind of like there's an aura around, like a protective energy. So yeah, sorry, that was quite a waffly way of saying this, but that's how yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, there's no right or wrong answer to this, so it's not really it's not a trick question. Because I don't know, I've spoken to lots of people about fairies, and I'm had experiences that I label as fairy experiences, and I'm still discovering what fairies are. I have a kind of a basic idea of fairies, but I'm still surprised by the new things that I discover along the way. So, how about you, Agnes? What do you feel fairies are?
Well, overall, and this is touches upon what we were saying before. Overall, I think I've been very in my life. I've been very drawn to the beliefs of certain peoples that are more tied to animism and this idea that everything in the world is alive. And so since as an adult, I have not seen a fairy. I do believe that these living spirits that we cannot see, that are behind the things we can see, can be embodied by the physical form of a fairy. So it's perfectly plausible that fairies do exist if we could see them, but it can also be a way of as humans of being of putting a face and a body and a character to a very vital and living aspect of nature in the world. And so, like I said, as an adult, I have not seen any fairies, but when I was a little girl, when I think I was about 3 years old, I was walking with my mother in our house, and she was telling me about the elves that lived in our house. And she showed me, she told me one was like, I don't know how I still have this memory, but she told me one was hiding in the wall, and I have this memory of seeing an elf-like creature. It didn't have wings. It was more of an elf-like creature that was sort of scurrying away. So this has stayed with me my whole life. And so because of that, I feel that, it's completely possible that fairies and all of these mythical creatures exist, and perhaps it's only children who can see them because their minds are more open. And even if I think about the possibility of seeing a fairy now, even no matter how alluring it would be, I think there's still a part of me that would be afraid, just because to cross into that other unknown realm of that goes beyond the mundane. So perhaps that fear is what can block many of us from seeing things that we would otherwise very happily see.
Oh, that sounds like, yeah, I agree with that. I think there is that as we get older and we're learning about the dangers in the world, but as children, we're just very open, aren't we, to the world. We just don't have that experience of within us to create those barriers to seeing beyond the veil. That experience sounds amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Agnes. Yeah, wow. Can I ask a couple of questions about what you saw? Do you remember how big the being was, or anything about its appearance?
Just like the size of my hand. So I'm not very good with measurements, but from the wrist to the top of the middle finger, I would say that more or less that size. And kind of, I can't really remember very many details, but I do remember thinking that it was elf-like. So apparently, so I already had an idea of what elves were like, and so this fit into whatever that idea was. But as I say, it's incredible that I can even have this memory, because I don't remember very many things from when I was that age. I mean, 3 years old is quite small. And so it's a very distinct memory, but not very detailed. I just remember seeing it and then it scampering away and me being astonished.
I think that's the thing is with these experiences that people have, and I'm talking from my experience as well, is it does stay with you. You never forget it, do you? I mean, even if it fades over time, it's still something that stands out as unusual in your life. And I think that's why people remember these experiences so well. I mean, have either of you had a look at the fairy census?
No, that is a new discovery for me. I had no idea it existed, and just looked at it today. And I mean, it's amazing because you kind of learn as we go on this Fae journey. We're learning more and more, and it's pretty amazing. Like that this website exists. Like that's just, yeah. I just feel like I'm discovering more as as we go on this journey. So yeah, I'd never knew about the fairy census before. So
Yeah, it's a great source for research and learning about experiences that people have had. It's pulled together by Dr. Simon Young, and he's published 2 censuses now. One was 2014 to 17, and he's just released 2017 to 2023, or 2018 to 2023, yeah. So it's just hundreds of people all over the world that have submitted their fairy experiences. And for anybody listening, if you've had a fairy experience, you can submit that on Fairiest. I think it's fairiest.com. I'll put the link in the notes for the show anyway, and there's a survey that you can fill in and share anonymously your experience. And then it's a great resource to look at as well, to learn about fairies. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Agnes. I was going to come back to fairy magic, because I know that's something that is very much part of the book and that I know I'm really fascinated with. What is when you're researching magic and writing about magic, are there any elements of fairy magic that you were particularly drawn to when writing the book?
I think for me, like putting the spells together were kind of a way. I think growing up as a child, I would always make up spells, just to add a bit of magic as you would as a child. And I think um, in this book, we've kind of were inspired by, folklore and, maybe some extent like paganism, etc. And just wanted to do like a very um, soft spells to help children with whatever worries they might have on that day. So if it's, they feel a bit shy, or if they want to break the ice with a friend, as one I know with one of the fairies, or if they want to bring good luck by making a stone and putting one of the fairy symbols. And we decided to give each fairy a symbol, because it would be like a little talisman that the children or even adults, if they want to try the spell, they could kind of use it to try and kind of like focus what their wishes or what they want to manifest. And I think it really was kind of used our imagination with also like a bit of research as well. But I think they're all kind of very easy spells to do, and I think that's what's nice about it, is that they're easy and magical, and they bring the book, they bring more magic within that realm. And there's nothing, it's just supposed to be positive and nice. And yeah, so I think that's how that was kind of like one approach to the spells. Yeah.
Lorna and I, we've also talked about the fact that since the moment that this idea came about, it kind of it all came together very magically, like how I was saying that we put our ideas together, outlined together, and we sent it to our editor. We actually we also, and maybe Lorna wants to say something about this, but we also did our own ritual right before we submitted our proposal to the publisher. And then the response was very positive and relatively swift. And given my many years working towards getting published, it was a surprise to see how sort of magical the process seemed to be. It kind of, for both of us, it kind of seemed unreal, and it continues. Everything's gone relatively smoothly. We were so lucky to get such a wonderful illustrator chosen by the publisher to work with us. So we just feel there have been so many fortunate things along the way, and now 2.5 years later, we're coming to publication, and it all feels very magical. And so the book is magical, and the experience of writing the book is magical, and having the book is magical. And when we were writing the book, it just felt like their stories wrote themselves, sort of, as if, we would think about a particular fairy, and then all of a sudden her origin story would just kind of create itself on the page, through a few edits and so on. But it was very magical the way the natural elements came together with the folklore and the magic and all of those things. It just felt very cohesive. But before I continue rambling on, maybe Lorna can say something about the ritual that we did, as it was her idea.
Yeah. Well, basically, actually, we did it just after we had actually received just an email from the publisher saying it was saying that I could be interested in this idea. So actually, it was at that point, and then afterwards we did a gratitude ritual during the full moon, just to kind of like thank the universe for getting a response from the publishers, And then I think a few weeks later, then we got a kind of, or maybe it was a month later, then we got a proper kind of offer letter, I think, and then it all kind of started moving on afterwards. So yeah, and we did it in my little garden by the apple tree, and no, it kind of felt, when we did it, it felt very kind of, I don't know, it was it felt very empowering, but also it was nice because we felt already quite grateful that we had a kind of initial positive response, and so we felt, yes, we're just gonna, thank the universe for it and hope that it goes well for us, and it seems that it has, and we were very lucky. As Agnes says, it all kind of magically kind of happened, and it seemed to be quite we easily wrote the copy for the fairies. They seemed to kind of come to mind quite quickly. We were very easily inspired by our surroundings, and just creating them was like quite easy. And actually there was something else that happened, which was a bit later on, once we had finished writing Faedom. Both our daughters, I don't know if you remember Agnes, but they both found 4-leaf clovers. My daughter in my garden, and I think it was Agnes, was it your daughter somewhere? And it was like in a space of like 24 hours. So that was pretty like magical, really, because it's not every day that you find two 4-leaf clovers.
No,
Exactly.
that's definitely a fairy sign. When I first heard about the book and then received my copy of the book, I just felt this book comes from the heart, and that's why the fairies are behind it, because fairies connect with heart energy and the energy of love, and that's the vibration. From my experience and the many people I've spoken to, they respond to that. So yeah, that's part of the magic that you did. Yeah.
Yeah, I've just had goosebumps when you said that. It was like I had like quite a, yeah, well, thank you so much for saying that, because I think it does come from the heart. So yeah, wow, yeah.
I love that.
And the 4-leaf clovers, I've spoken to 2 guests in the last year that have found that connect with fairies and have found 4-leaf clovers. One of my guests, Emma, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, she regularly finds 4-leaf clovers, and she's actually collected a massive jar of them.
Wow. Yeah.
She can go out into nature, and she sets the intention, because I really feel it's all about intention. That's what magic is, isn't it? Setting an intention. And she can say, right, I'd really like a sign that everything's going to work out, or something like that. And then she'll be out walking, and she'll see a 4-leaf clover in front of her.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've spoken to another guest who, in an upcoming episode, has another amazing account. And she's been finding 4-leaf clovers in her garden. So I do feel that it's definitely a sign from the fairies. In fact, your 2 daughters both found a 4-leaf clover. Isn't that beautiful? What a beautiful affirmation.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really beautiful. We couldn't believe it. It was so lovely. Just when we found out that we both had found like 4-leaf clovers, it was just, and also because our daughters are friends, so also it was, that's what's even more beautiful about it, that so.
And it was funny because for them it was kind of normal. I mean, at least in my situation, my daughter was like, "Oh, I just found this 4-leaf clover. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary." And I was like, "What? Do you know how rare that is?" And she was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, she knew that it was special, but she didn't know exactly how difficult it is to find one, because I'd been looking for four-leaf clovers my whole life. So I was like, wow, you just found one just like that. So it was very sweet. And I also wanted to refer to what you said, Claire, about manifesting your intention, because and how that's a big part of magic. And I just wanted to say how strongly I believe in that, because I feel that in order to get something or achieve something, you really need to tell the universe that you want that thing, or and you first you have to tell yourself, because we don't always know what we want. So we have to tell ourselves, and then we have to tell the world what we want, and that's the first step to getting to that goal, whether it takes a day or 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is.
You both are obviously expert manifestors, and I've spoken to other guests that have, through that intention, manifested amazing things. But I think it's always because it's for the highest good, isn't it? It's something that is for your highest good. So it's about, like you say, connecting, asking yourself, right, what do I actually want? What is it I actually want? And then setting that intention and putting it out into the universe.
I also think that the biggest impediment to those kinds of wishes is that deep down, a lot of people, even though they want something, deep down they might feel, because of how they've been raised or because of what people have told them, that they might not deserve it. And so even if you want something really badly and deep down you feel like you don't deserve it, that will block you from getting close to that thing. So it's really important, I think. And as we were talking about before, about confidence and self-respect and caring for yourself and caring for your own needs and the needs of people around you, is to really care about your own self as well as other people, but also to start with yourself and really feel like you deserve good things. And then the world and the powers out there, whether they're fairies or other spirits, will help you get there.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Really important. I just wanted to mention the wonderful illustrator who, because the illustrations are just beautiful, and how they've helped you to develop the book. I mean, how did you work with the illustrator Nadsaya in communicating your ideas, and how she translated your ideas into the book?
Well, actually, it's the publisher who selected the illustrator, who did like an amazing, like such beautiful work. Like it's breathtaking, I think, what she created. And how we approached it was that we had put together some very detailed notes of how we saw the fairies, what we thought they looked like, what accessories they might be wearing, and what their surroundings were like. But apart from that, then she had free reign to interpret what we had written. And and like what she created was like so beautiful, and the detail is mesmerizing. I mean, it is fabulous what she's done. So so that was kind of like our approach with the illustrator.
Okay. And what do you hope readers will take away from Faedom? What are your hopes for the book?
I think that I hope that it will be an empowering book for children. Not only kind of add magic in their lives, but as Agnes was saying about kind of what having the confidence to manifest things in your life. And I think hopefully that will will be a tool to help children do that as they grow, but also to learn about nature and how to respect nature and also understand nature from both a kind of magical point of view and a scientific point of view. And we just hope it will just like add a touch of magic in, our readers' lives. And I think it will inspire them, I hope.
I just highlight the idea of just my hope for readers, whatever their age, would be first of all for them to be kind of for them to be absorbed into this world, whether it's through the pictures or through the words, or a combination of both, and to give our readers an escape from everyday life and into a fantasy world, but a fantasy world that's very much connected to the real world, and for them to be able to see the magic that is everywhere in our everyday world, but we just want to see it, and as Lorna said, to respect the natural world, and to see that our actions really do have consequences, and our planet is our home, and the universe is our home, and it's very large and very powerful, but at the same time, it's still a delicate system. And the kinder we are to our environment and each other, the kinder the world will be to us. So I think so just to recap, I think the two aspects are most essential is just an escape and enjoyment, and then also an appreciation for the natural world and the world of imagination.
That's beautifully said, Agnes. I think that's really, that's very nicely said. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for your time. Yeah, that was beautiful, both of you, for both your perspectives there. It's a really lovely way to close our conversation, unless there's anything else that I haven't covered and there's anything burning that you want to share that we need to include. Is there anything else that you want to say, either of you?
I will just add. I just wanted to add about the illustrator, because a funny thing about it is that we've never actually spoken to her. So we've never had a conversation. But in spite of that, I think both Lorna and I, we still feel quite connected to her, because we've worked together, although remotely, because she's in the US, and without contact. But we've shared this experience, and we're really looking forward to meeting her one day. But she, as Lorna said, we had our ideas for who the fairies are, but we always wanted to trust that she also had her vision and her feelings. And of course, there were times when our visions didn't exactly overlap, and then we worked through those moments, and then we merged our ideas, and we got as close as we possibly could to the most the most accurate, let's say, representation of what we imagined these fairies to be. And I forgot what I actually wanted to say, but we can't imagine having any other kinds of illustrations, because of course there are so many different depictions of fairies. But for our vision of what fairies are, these illustrations are exactly it for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for coming on the Fairy Whispering podcast today and sharing with me about your beautiful book, Faedom. which is, well, by the time this episode goes out, will be available for people to, I think you can pre-order it now, can't you?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. In most good bookshops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please check that out. I'll put some links in the notes for the show so you can see the book and just make an amazing gift for anyone of any age, really, because it's, I mean, I love it. I'm going to enjoy reading this over the next few weeks because there's so much in there. There's so much detail and interesting facts about fairies. So thank you both.
Well, thank you very much for having us on your podcast. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. It was wonderful. Thank you.